Welcome everyone. Bonjour, Wache. Welcome to our webinar today. We're really excited to have you all here. I'm going to be just hopping in. We are waiting for Willie Littlechild to join us, but he's running a little bit late. He's having some technical issues. So I'm just going to hop in, and I know that some of you have already been getting wordy with things, so this is all good, but I just want to cover a few housekeeping notes as we begin our session here today. If you could please turn off your microphones and cameras, that would provide us some internet issues for some individuals that maybe have lower access to internet. And also, please submit your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to ask the panelists as we go along through the webinar today. And today's webinar will be recorded and shared on Right to Play Canada's YouTube channel, which will be shared post the meeting. So thank you again for all being here. And let's just take a moment here to introduce ourselves here on the panel. I'm actually on the panel as well. And my name is Rachel Mishenene. I'm Anishinaabe and French mix. I'm originally from Mishenene First Nation, and I am also a member of Admantung First Nation. I'm calling you in today from the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people of Fort William First Nation, of which my son is also a member of. So I'm based in Thunder Bay. I'm also the executive director for the Indigenous programs team with Right to Play, and have joined the team in 2020 and have been really excited to be here with my team, and also with the panelists that are here today, and the work that we're doing and ways that we can practice intentional reconciliation, but also reciprocity, and as we go forward in working together. So miigwech for having me here today, and thank you for all being here. And I would like to now pass it over to Dr. Tricia McGuire Adams.
Miigwech, Rachel. Bonjour. Hello, everyone. My name is Tricia McGuire Adams. I am an Anishinaabe woman from Bengwaniashi, Anishinaabeg, and Thunder Bay, Ontario. I now live, work, and thrive in unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory, otherwise known as Ottawa. I'm an assistant professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Ottawa, where I also hold a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Ganandawisiwin Sovereignties, or Good Health Sovereignties. Miigwech, thank you so much for having me today.
Miigwech, thank you, Tricia. It's really exciting to have you here, and I'm really excited to be working alongside you in the upcoming years. And I'd now like to introduce Shawnna Smith. So Shawnna is a community mentor from Walpole Island First Nation. So she's a partner with Right to Play.
Hi, bonjour. So I was one of two communities that were selected to run the Right to Play land-based learning pilot project. I've been the community mentor for Walpole Island First Nation, which is Bikadrolong territory. We are home of the three fires, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations. Yeah, I've been the community mentor here in Walpole Island since 2013. My background is early childhood education and child and youth care. I've been sober and living the Minobamadzawin, the good life, for almost 5 years now. Miigwech.
Awesome, miigwech, Shawnna, miigwech, Tricia. It's really great to have you here with us today, Shawnna. It's really important for us to hear your perspectives as well, and your experiences of being a community mentor, child youth worker in your community, serving your people, serving children and youth there. So we're really grateful to have you here today. We also do have Dr. Willie Littlechild, who is the Commissioner with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner of Canada. He's also a lawyer, member of Parliament, and International Chief for Treaties 6, 7, and 8. If you're not familiar where these treaties are, I recommend that you open up Google Maps and Google in treaties in Canada, and you'll see how many treaties we have between Indigenous people here in Canada and with the government of Canada. So please take some time to identify and recognize what lands you're also situated on today. All right, so I'm going to put this question out there, and as we ask these questions to panelists, I might pop in an answer as well once the panelists have responded to this. But I want you to think about these questions as well as they relate to you in your own personal life. Land-based activities that take place on the land are not generally just for Indigenous people. I think everyone has a relationship with the land in whatever shape or form that might look like for you. You might be out camping all the time. You might have property someplace. You might be strolling and taking your dog for a walk. But think about all the things that you do on the land, and think about, how you access the land and in what ways it nourishes and feeds your spirit as well. So as these questions are being asked, please just take the time to recognize, your own space and experience and presence in the land and the activities that you do on that land. All right, so I'm going to put this question out to Shawnna or Tricia as well. Just from your perspective, what is land-based learning? I'll start with Shawnna.
Miigwech. So from my perspective, land-based learning is a chance to reconnect with the land in order to reconnect with our spirit, our culture, and our identities. It was very empowering to open up opportunities through land-based learning like that in my community. You could see changes and growth in youth that maybe can't connect or don't find that in a regular educational platform.
Miigwech, Shawnna, I guess I will jump in now. And it also, my understanding also resonates very deeply with what you've shared, Shawnna. So land-based learning is, for me, a concerted effort to reconnect Indigenous peoples to our lands through a variety of activities, whether that be through fishing, walking the land, traditional sports, hunting. It also includes learning about the land from our elders and from our knowledge holders as they share traditional stories and or ancestral knowledge about the land.
Awesome, Miigwech. These are great responses, and I think that there'll definitely be some overlap with our guests that are tuning in today and listening and learning. For me, land-based learning, in my experience in education, I've been asked by teachers over the past 16, 17 years in my work with educators in Canada is what is Aboriginal education? I'm using the word Aboriginal because the term is always changing. It's now Indigenous education. But what is Aboriginal education? And for me, Aboriginal education or Indigenous education is about learning from our people and learning about our ways and learning about our connection to the land, because that is such a big piece of our identity and our space and place in what we call Canada. And also our relationship with the land as it revolves around our family and how our families are built and created and stay connected and strong through our activities and time that we provide ourselves to be on the land, to learn from each other, but also we learn about ourselves in that space. So just looping back in the Aboriginal education content piece, Aboriginal education to me is really about just learning about who you are, culturally, where you come from, your people, and where you're situated, and how all these relationships with yourself, others, and your land really make you who you are. So yeah, so land-based learning can mean multiple things for many people. And I know that we have a chat happening as well. So please feel free to drop your chats in as to what these things might mean to you. So we'll go on to the next question. All right, question number 2. What is the biggest challenge land-based learnings face? So when it comes to, you know, practicing some of these learning opportunities in communities, what are some of those challenges that maybe you've experienced in, you know, in your community, Shawnna?
Some challenges in our community, I guess. Knowledge keepers, I guess, or like accessing knowledge keepers within our community. Maybe they weren't necessarily available to like mingle with our youth that were in our program, because a lot of our programming takes place in the evening time, outside of school, where maybe it's like later in the evening. So it could be timing for them, or it could just be not finding specific knowledge keepers for what we had planned. I know through the summer I had planned, I'd gotten a hold of 2 canoes that needed to be restored. And so I was trying to find a knowledge keeper within our community to help us to teach our youth. And like the idea was to have this knowledge keeper come in and work with us to restore these canoes. And then we were gonna take the youth out on like a camping trip by canoe. That was one of,
that's a good example. That's a really good example to give. When I think about these challenges as well, and the challenges will be diverse based on each community. Shawnna shared an example just in her community. And when we look at communities across Canada, there's the challenges will vary, and it all depends on many things, including access to resources like money. Because things cost money, food costs money. So when you're wanting to bring people together, you might need to have money to provide food for children, youth in the program. Also providing, you know, having access to money to be able to purchase equipment or materials that could be used in a land-based program. And to be able to have those things shipped to communities. So even just the cost of shipping things to a remote First Nation community, including my own, it can be very costly. So access to money is a really, I think is probably one of the bigger issues that might prevail when it comes to these challenges. Another one would be access to physical resources in the community itself. Where do you run the program? You know, what kind of space is available for children and youth to be indoors? What kind of space is available outdoors? How do we get outdoors? You might need skidoos, you might need trucks, you might need a school bus in the community, or you might need boats, all of those things. So access to those resources can also be a potential challenge for anyone trying to deliver a land-based program in a community. And then also Shawnna had a really good example in terms of just like lack of access to human resource. So lack of access to people that you can actually connect with in the community who maybe have specific knowledge. Just because someone is Indigenous doesn't mean that they're going to be knowledgeable about all things related to land. Just like you yourselves that are sitting out there, each of you are gifted with different skill sets and have knowledge of specific things. And so each of us come with different gifts. Well, the same thing with Indigenous communities as well, and the practice of, knowledge holders in our community that are connected to the land. Some could, have more familiarity with birch bark, making canoes, snowshoes, fishing, making nets for fishing, all of those things. So everyone comes with different sets of skills. But when there's a lack of access to be able to connect with individuals because they might not be in the community anymore, that can be a potential challenge. Tricia, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, sure. This is such an excellent question. And I have two main thoughts around it that I'd like to share. And the first is, over the previous few years, I've worked with the Anishinaabe community, Nykatchewanunk First Nation, located in Treaty 3, on a community-driven research project. And I had the opportunity through this project, and I had the honor to learn from their elders about land and land-based knowledge. One concern the elders continually spoke of is the lack of opportunities to connect children and youth to land-based learning. They acknowledge that the majority of the time children are in school learning with limited opportunities to connect with land-based learning. Recognizing this barrier, the elders are calling for education and curricular changes that create more and consistent learning opportunities on the land, led by the elders and knowledge holders. And then the second thought I had is, I also have the opportunity and the honor to teach about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit perspectives to teacher candidates at the University of Ottawa, where they all take this course as part of their mandatory aspect of their teacher training. And notably, this is a direct response to address the TRC call to action number 62. So it's a very meaningful opportunity to engage in these learnings. However, what I'm hearing from the students is when they take their placements at their schools, there's a shortage of opportunities to implement what they are learning in their future classrooms. You see, when teachers are teaching in their classrooms, they must follow their provincial curriculum, which not necessarily centers Indigenous ways of knowing or land-based knowledges. So it's up to the individual teacher to implement reconciliation-based education or land-based learning, which often detracts from their required course curriculum. So while there's a desire from their students, the teacher candidates, to create land-based learning in schools, which would be to address what the elders' concerns are as well, there's not a parallel desire yet from the provincial curriculum to implement such activities.
Miigwech, thank you, Tricia. Yes, definitely. Education is such a big area of where we are today. I just remember the quote. Education is what got us in this mess. Education is going to be what gets us out. And definitely when it comes to educators across Canada, especially in public school settings or private school settings, there's a certain curriculum that everyone has to follow. And, ideally it'd be great, I think, to have the curriculum take kids out as much as possible into the environment, into the natural environment, to start to recognize, their own communities. They may not live in a, nice, pristine country. They might live downtown Toronto, but getting kids outdoors and getting kids to see the natural environment that exists in that space will allow them to also make that connection that we're not the only species living on this planet. But curriculum itself, needs to change. And I think that's, with teachers and educators across Canada, whether they're Indigenous or not, there are teachers that are really committed to wanting to be more inclusive and to ensure that Indigenous presence is in the classrooms as well. And that requires us coming together and sharing our stories and listening and learning from each other. So I feel that, with education, we have a long ways to go. And so when we have opportunities that are about land and connection to land, it would not only just allow people to grow in themselves, but also allow to grow amongst each other and to build stronger communities and to really look at the importance of how land really is important for all of us. Okay, so we are on to question number 3. And so this question is going to be asked to Shawnna again. I'll start with you, but this is, what are some benefits or successes associated with land-based programming? So you've been running a land-based program in your community. What are some of the benefits or the successes that you've witnessed and among the children and youth in your community, or the program that maybe you were delivering?
So through our land-based learning pilot project, we had an opportunity to bring in a few community elders and helpers to offer like gender or like role specific teachings. We thinking specifically for like male teachings, and like we had two really awesome knowledge keepers come in, and they did a talking circle with just the youth that identified as males within our group. And the one elder used sweetgrass to explain his teaching to the youth, which was really cool. So as he was talking, we were braiding our sweetgrass, and he was talking to us and teaching us different things. And then at the end of that group, or towards the end, I guess, of that session, we had to trade our sweetgrass with another participant in the group, which was pretty cool. And then we did some like kind of breakout sessions where we talked with like one-on-one with somebody else in the group. Myself and my co-facilitator, we were both female, so we kind of partnered up and like allowed all the male participants to partner up together. And I don't know, it was just really awesome to see and to feel just the energy in the room of these like young men kind of finding their space, opening up, sharing. We had some like I guess like some tears, which is really good and really strong. And we like, it was awesome because we created that safe space for them to allow that to happen. And then I had another opportunity for the whole group. We were invited to attend a ceremony locally with a couple of our knowledge keepers, and the males got like fire teachings there with the knowledge keepers. And the one male from our group, he, after getting those teachings and attending that ceremony, he went home and he was able to start a sacred fire for his family's like ceremony afterwards, which was awesome. That was something that they, before that teaching was given, they were trying to do their own ceremony before, and they were having issues starting that sacred fire. Then he got the teachings, and then he started it like nothing. It's awesome, empowering.
Miigwech, thank you, Shawnna. I think like there's so many stories that could be shared, and I think that's one of the biggest pieces I think about when it comes to benefits or successes of a land-based program is the actual stories and the experiences. There's the best way to learn is to learn by listening, learn by doing, learn by experiencing, no matter what that lesson is. And so when it comes to land, it's that connection to others and connection to the land itself, but also connection to yourself, because many times we've been, I think conditioned and throughout our lives, and have been influenced by multiple factors that exist beyond us to really challenge us or kind of push us away from someplace or push us into something. But when it comes to those just experiences that you have on the land, can really be transformative because it challenges those conditions that we've been accustomed to. I know when I think about my own family and I think about my mom's now 80, and she she has a elementary school education. She was also she had also attended Indian day school in her community, while all of her siblings, my aunts and uncles, had to go to residential school. So I know her knowledge was really built around her time that she spent with her grandparents and also her parents. And her knowledge of the land and knowledge of the ecosystem, her knowledge of, fishing, netting, tanning, hunting, making, birch bark, everything. So I feel that, her knowledge didn't come from a book. It came from actual firsthand experience, from her experience of watching and listening to those around her who were sharing with her the knowledge that they had, but also the stories that take place around any land-based activities. I think fire, sitting around a fire is a really good space to really learn. I know with my aunts, they love to put a tea kettle on the fire, and then they just start sharing stories. And they share stories of, a long time ago, or whoever. They make fun of each other at that point, or they just talk about, just memories and experiences that they've had. So land-based is not, you don't necessarily even have to be doing anything. You could actually just be sitting out on the land, sharing stories and experiences. Thank you for that, Shawnna, for sharing. Tricia, would you like to add anything to this?
No, I think you guys have already covered a robust example of the benefits, and I will be speaking to some of my own thinking on this, but in the next question.
Perfect, thank you. And I think the one thing that I really want, the takeaway that I think just from, the programs, when I see land-based programs that are run, not just in with Right to Play with the pilot that we have, but also just in even my own tribal area and any land-based activities, it builds pride, it builds cultural identity and connection, and it really impacts the individual, and building their sense of self-worth, their confidence, but also their overall mental health and physical well-being. Being on the land isn't just about getting out and being physically active. It's about just being so present and connected to yourself and your relationship with others in the land, and also relationship with the land, and knowing your rights as well, and building your knowledge of knowing your rights as an Indigenous person, and the rights that you are entitled to in that. So Miigwech, thank you both for sharing. I just wanted to now welcome, we do have Willie Littlechild, who is finally able to join us through video. I knew that he had just popped in a while ago here in the telephone mode, but Willie, if you'd love to just come on camera and just say hi and introduce yourself, we're really happy to have you here. You just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. First of all, let me apologize for my technical problems. It's the building I'm in is not very conducive to internet service here on the res, but that's regrettable for me, because I wanted to join you right at the outset. But my name is Willie Littlechild in English. My Cree name is Mahikan Mohteo, which means wolf walker. My chief's name is Osauki, which is golden eagle. But my residential school name was number 65. And I mentioned that last because the topic that we are dealing with here this morning is really related not only to reconciliation, but at the outset, the impacts of being separated from your parents. A quote that I remember from one of the witnesses, which I thought was really appropriate in this instance, was when he reminded us as commissioners, he said, yes, we were removed from our parents, our family bond was cut, but don't forget, we were also removed from the land. And that really highlighted the importance to recognize the link of the residential school legacy to the resurgence of land-based learning, because it's now sometimes considered as
All right, welcome, Miigwech. Thank you for being here. We're just happy to have you here, and we're grateful for you to be here as well. So Miigwech to you and for your sharing. So I'm going to ask this question to Tricia. What are the main impacts that land-based learning has on communities based on the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is such an excellent question. And, you know, thinking about the academic scholarship and community-driven research projects, there's certainly multiple studies now that demonstrate that connecting Indigenous peoples to more opportunities to learning from, with, and through the land creates enhanced mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, or holistic well-being. From an Indigenous perspective, having more opportunities to connect with the land and the waters creates a deep sense of well-being and reconnection to who we are as Indigenous peoples. I've heard elders explain this feeling in my work with Nakachewanung First Nation. Part of our research project was to take elders out on their land to share their sacred stories of their community and lands. While being out on the land, the elders all emphatically shared how they felt, and they all described how being on the land felt so good to them. as it allowed them to not only be present and connect to their land, but to also remember the stories, the experiences, and all the ancestral knowledge that's just started to flow through them. So the impact of this example is measured by elders' enhanced well-being. One key finding from this work relates to the desire of elders to be out on the land, to access this feeling of well-being. But for many elders, the lack of accessibility of land-based activities creates barriers for their inclusion. And this finding also relates to my next example. I have been invited to work with Dr. Wilton Littlechild and his nation, the Musqueam's Nation, on a community-driven research project related to understanding health and well-being from people with disabilities. We have just completed a final report titled Musqueam's Disability Futures, Vital Practices, Needs, Actions, and Dreams. This research project learned from the voices of the people with disabilities who live in Musqueam's. And one of the central findings that we learned from them is that there is a lack of opportunity for people with disabilities to access land-based activities. When we think about being out on the land, we mostly think about able-bodied experiences, which creates barriers for the inclusion, the meaningful inclusion of people with disabilities. So part of our final report is to call for policy and funding changes to create more accessible and inclusive land-based learning opportunities. Having such changes in place will create immense impacts on the well-being of people with disabilities. Miigwech.
Miigwech. Thank you, Tricia. All right, so let's move on here, because that's a lot of work that you've done, that you've also really put into not just in your own learning and growing, but making those connections and building connections with community is really important. And that's a really important piece with reconciliation as well. It has to be in reciprocity. It has to be done together, and it has to be a sharing together that goes forward. So that was my takeaway from your sharing there, Tricia. So miigwech. All right, it's quiz time. So there's 3 questions here posted on the screen. So we'll ask the first one, and then I guess we're going to, I don't know if we should ask all 3 of them at the same time, or go through one of them at a time. Oh, look at that. They're on the ball there. So they've got a poll happening on your screen. So please complete the questions. So the first question is, what does the Indigenous word, Tricia, Ganandawisiwin?
Ganandawisiwin.
Ganandawisiwin. What does that mean? So Tricia had just spoke about that. So if you're a really attentive listener, you're going to get this right. The second question is, what was the main outcome from the Right to Play land-based pilot program? There's only one choice here. So, and then number 3 is, approximately how many distinct Indigenous languages exist in Canada? Now, we didn't talk about languages in this, but let's see how on the ball you are with getting this information, or you might already know this information. We'll just give you some time to answer the questions.
While we're pausing for that, can I make a comment to the last mention?
Yes.
I just received the report yesterday, and she's very, very right in terms of the exclusion of persons with disabilities in this whole area. That's why in the North American Indigenous Games, at least when I first organized them, we didn't make a separation. We had both physically able and those with disabilities participating at the same time in the games. We didn't separate them like the Olympics and the Paralympics kind of movement. And it was really, really very highly emotional and exciting to have that combined program, in a sense that everyone felt included. In fact, there were some very emotional moments throughout the games. For example, the first time in the relay race in swimming, the supposedly disabled team came in with and won a bronze medal. and it just tore the whole building down in terms of the Commonwealth Stadium where the event was being held. And also in a 400-meter race when the leader stopped and waited for the person behind her to catch up, and then they both crossed the line together. You know, things like that that were really unique in a sense by not separating the two so-called. And sometimes I feel that they're more abled because they're so gifted in other areas that they can contribute. But I just thought I'd mention that because that study is very, very important. It's the latest data we have on persons with disabilities in Canada. And unfortunately, we're still excluded from a lot of things because of it.
Miigwech, thank you for that. Willie, I appreciate you sharing that. And also with Tricia, I know a lot of Tricia's work has also really focused on people with disabilities and accessibility issues to any type of programming, include not just physical spaces into places, but the actual access to programming. And when you had mentioned that there's more that Willie had mentioned that there's more that they do in the sense because they have to do more because of those accessibility issues. And I hope that, you know, when we're looking forward and we're moving forward, and for those of you that are listening in, you know, think about your own programs that you have. I know that we're thinking about that at Right to Play as well. We want to make sure that people, that all children and youth are feeling that they're a part of it, whether it's in a physical space that they come in and attend programs, or it's an outdoor space, but knowing that they have that accessibility should not be one of those issues that prevent them from participating in anything that is either sport related, land related, or activity related. So just keep that in mind for you folks out there as well. Look at ways that you not just be inclusive, but how can you make sure that your spaces and your programs are also available to everyone. All right, so we do have, you would have all answered the poll. I'm sure you all scored really high and did really good on that. But now we're going to encourage you to ask any questions that you might have for us here or anyone on the panel specifically. And these will be filtered and will be also sent over to us. And I know that Tricia, Shawnna, and Willie are also welcome to respond to anyone that you might feel connected to in the questions that we receive. So I'll just give you a moment to think about our session here and to write any questions that you might have. There is one actually already that I noticed. Mary Jo had a question, Tricia. What are some examples of how people with disabilities could access land-based learning?
Yeah, this was a question that we spoke deeply about in the research project. And so one of the questions that we asked folks with disabilities in Musqueam how they would like to have opportunities for land-based learning. And a lot of them spoke about the opportunity to visit the land, so having accessible walkways or places where they can access medicines and different opportunities to visit the land, but in an accessible way. Again, when we think about land-based learning, a lot of it is based on an able-bodied person, so walking the bush or walking the river. And so if we can center a disability-centered approach to those same activities, we can be very creative about thinking about ways to make it more accessible and inclusive. We also heard about how Musqueam they're already doing a lot of great work in terms of creating accessible ceremonies, which is also part of the land, right? If we think about land-based learning, it's deeply connected to our knowledge systems and also our ceremonies. And so Lori Buffalo, who is a co-researcher on this project, she talked about how Indigenous peoples who are disabled they're already building ceremonial structures that are accessible. And so I think the biggest learning from these conversations is if we put the perspectives of people with disability first and foremost, then we won't have to remove barriers because we're going to be creating systems and structures and institutions that are already barrier-free. And that includes land-based learning.
That's a great response. Miigwech for sharing, Tricia. We have another question here from Sean. How can land-based education support reconciliation? Who would like to answer this? How can land-based education support reconciliation?
Well, let me, if I may, take that one on, not to directly answer, but just to give an example from the 7,000 plus witnesses we heard for the 6 years we crisscrossed the country. We heard many times about the separation and separation from parents, as I said before, separation from land, separation from solutions to trauma, for example, so that returning to culture and initiatives like that, returning to language, are now becoming to be seen as treatment, which is good, because in order to, it should be easy in a way, one would think, when you look at the definition of reconciliation. In my language, Untitled, having good relations or restoring respectful relations. And if you take that lens, reconciliation through that lens, it should be a direct instruction for us to learn to get along with each other, regardless of ability or disability. And I think the biggest trauma that I see right now, having looked back now for the 7.5 years that we've had since then, the report, is the real need to focus on mental health. Mental health is a real ignored area of solution for access to abilities to pursue reconciliation. And indeed, in one school, for example, they've designed a curriculum for reconciliation. And that's how I see one of the links, for example, directly with the schools in dealing with the children and youth, having some inclusive creativity in that area of curriculum design, for example. But I leave the rest to the experts, because I think that just the return to the land and reconciling with Mother Earth, for example. 2 days ago, there was a national gathering on climate change and how you can implement the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples during the era of climate change. And it began with a discussion on the need to look at climate change from the lens of reconciliation, and concluded the presentations in that way. So there is a direct link, I would say, with land-based education, because it adds so much. It adds so much to the challenge of, in some places, reconciliation being rebuffed or not wanting to be pursued. It has a very, very important role in advancing reconciliation. And I see that and witness that, for example, with the Paralympics when we started to engage with them through acts of reconciliation with Team Canada before they went to the Paralympics, during and after. So there is a direct link with the whole notion of the right to play and its advancing land-based learning. It's a direct link to also advancing reconciliation or beginning reconciliation if it's not there yet.
Miigwech, thank you, Willie. I appreciate your sharing and hearing your experiences too of stories that you've been carrying as well through the TRC visits to communities across Canada. And for also just explaining reconciliation, what that means for you, because I think that's one of the big questions that gets asked a lot. What is reconciliation to you? And my questions always, what does it mean to you first? Because I think to be able to kind of come to that space, we need to find that space of where we both agree what it might even mean to us. And maybe then we can go from there, because we're reconciling something. And sometimes I know, just from my experience with working with teachers, you know, there's a lot of grief that comes with what they have learned through the calls to action and from the findings from the TRC report, that this is like a shock, and what can I do? There's a lot of guilt. And so for me, one of the things is really learning, is just taking that time to learn and really unlearning the things that you have been taught, and how we've been divided, and how we've intentionally been divided through education, and looking at how do we bridge that gap together so we can continue to move forward in a place that is about healing and restoring and redefining what relationship means to us, and what it means to be healthy for both of us in our communities as we move forward. I know we have a few minutes left here, but we have another question here. As an ally and not an educator, how do you recommend we help influence the change and movement towards the right to play for land-based learnings within our communities? As an ally and not an educator, how do you recommend we help influence the change and movement towards the right to play for land-based learnings within our communities?
I can take a moment to respond to that question. It's a question that's really timely and important, for one, so thank you so much for asking it. And I think about this question a lot in both my community work, but also the work I do as a researcher, but also an educator, because people want to help. And when you call yourself a settler ally, you are acknowledging that you are carrying a responsibility towards reconciliation and towards enacting change. And I like to call that responsibility enacting change in your sphere of influence. We all have opportunities in our life, whether that be with our family, our friends, where we work, our community or volunteer work. All of these things are spheres of influence. And when you take up your responsibility as a settler ally, you're taking up the responsibility to speak out and to speak up for Indigenous perspectives of reconciliation and Indigenous resurgence as well. So I would encourage you to have those opportunities to be brave and courageous in those moments, both in advocating for Indigenous-led reconciliation efforts, but also if you happen to come across any anti-Indigenous racism in your sphere of influence, speaking up in those moments will matter. And so to your question about the land-based programming, it would be allowing yourself to create that space to have those conversations in your sphere of influence. Miigwech for the question.
Awesome, miigwech, Tricia. Would anyone else like to add to that? All right, it's 12:59, and we're just about to wrap up here, but before we leave, we have here on the screen ways that you can stay in touch and get connected. Also, this has been recorded, so you'll be able to find this on YouTube. And I want to thank Tricia, Shawnna, and Willie for joining me today and having this conversation. And in honor for September 30th, I wish you and your family much love as you get to enjoy that day and heal on that day as well, whatever that may be. So miigwech to each of you for coming, and thanks to everyone that joined us here today, and to the team that put us here in this space, in this virtual space. I wish you all the best in your journey, and please take time, in your life, in your journey, to continue to learn and to unlearn. Miigwech, thank you all very much.